Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery. Today's story is taken from an article written for CNN by Eric Levinson, Amanda Watts, and Holly Yan on April 28, 2023. As always, all my sources are in the show notes. Anna Walshe, a Massachusetts mother of 3, has not been seen since January 1st of this year. Prosecutors say her husband Brian Walshe killed her, dismembered her, and disposed of her remains, though as of yet, no body has been found. Brian Walshe told police that he last saw Anna on New Year's Day when she left their home in Cohasset for a flight to Washington, D.C. for her job, but authorities accused him of misleading investigators and charged him with Anna's murder. Brian has pleaded not guilty to the charges. His defense attorney noted that no body has been found and that there is no indication of if Anna died, how she died, and no murder weapon or motive has been established. We'll have to see if you agree with Brian's attorney. Please join me as we uncover what truths we can and solve what mysteries we may. Kinda Murderies, faked Warhols, forged wills, and the snowball of lies that swallowed Anna Walshe starts now. To uncover the truth behind the disappearance of Massachusetts mother Anna Walshe, we look to her husband Brian, a man to whom lies and fraud appear to have been second nature until they snowballed and ultimately crushed his wife Anna. And when the bill came due for Brian's many deceits, the price was Anna's life. Or, if it was not, at the very least we know that Anna has disappeared, and if there's any hope of finding out what happened to her, her husband Brian is where we must begin. Brian Walshe's father, Dr. Thomas Walshe, died in September 2018 and left nothing to Brian, leading to a protracted legal fight over his estate, according to court documents filed in Plymouth Probate and Family Court in Massachusetts. Dr. Walshe's will noted that he was not in contact with Brian, to whom he bequeathed only his best wishes and nothing else from his estate. Brian Walshe unsuccessfully contested the will and suggested his father's signature on the document was a possible forgery. Affidavits in opposition to Brian Walshe's petition said he had been estranged from his father and detailed years of swindling and manipulation. He had a severe falling out with his son, wrote Andrew Walshe, the state's executor and one of Dr. Walshe's nephews. Brian ran off with a significant amount of his money, and Brian had almost zero contact with Dr. Walshe over the last 10+ years. 1 month later, in October 2018, Brian Walshe was indicted on federal fraud charges for allegedly selling fake Andy Warhol artwork online. FBI investigators alleged Brian, or Anna Walshe, his wife, used her eBay account to sell the paintings in November 2016, less than a year after they were married. Anna Walshe was not charged with wrongdoing, but she apparently spoke to the person who purchased the fakes after the buyer learned the paintings were not authentic and located her work number. Brian Walshe is alleged to have taken real artwork from a friend to sell, but never did. He also did not compensate the friend for the art. In November 2018, he pleaded not guilty to wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, possession of converted goods, and unlawful monetary transaction. Then, 2.5 years later, in April of 2021, Brian Walshe pleaded guilty to 3 of the 4 counts in exchange for a recommended sentence of incarceration, supervised release, fines, restitution, and forfeiture. He also agreed to either return the artworks or pay for them. As part of his pre-sentencing probation, Brian Walshe was placed on monitoring and house arrest. He could request to leave home, but was required to detail the specific locations, times, and reasons. Approximately a year after this agreement, in December of 2022, it became evident that Brian Walshe suspected Anna of having an affair. He was routinely visiting the Instagram page of one of her male friends, and on December 26th, his mother, with his input and direction, obtained and hired a private investigator to surveil Anna Walshe in Washington, D.C. On December 27th of that same year, Brian Walshe Google searched, quote, "What's the best state to divorce for a man?" One day after that, on the 28th, during a dinner with a friend in D.C., Anna Walshe became uncharacteristically upset and told her friend she believed that Brian was going to be incarcerated as a result of his federal fraud case, and that she was prepared to leave him and take the children to Washington, D.C. On December 30th, 2022, Anna flew home to Massachusetts to be with her family for the holiday weekend, and was not expected to return to D.C. until January 3rd. The next day, the Walshes hosted a New Year's Eve dinner at their home with a friend named Jem. Brian and Anna went to bed shortly after the friend left around 1 or 1:30 a.m. Brian would later tell police that Anna Walshe said she had a work emergency and needed to fly to Washington for her job the next morning. In the early morning hours of New Year's Day, Anna got ready and kissed Brian goodbye and told him to go back to sleep. She usually took an Uber, a Lyft, or a taxi to the airport and left the house between 6 and 7 a.m. Although Brian was asleep again at that time, he assumes this is what Anna did. According to prosecutors, later on New Year's Day, Brian Walshe made a series of Google searches on his son's iPad, including, quote, "How long before a body starts to smell?" 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to, how long for someone to be missing to inherit, and how to clean blood from a wooden floor. Walshe told police that a babysitter arrived in the afternoon and he left home to get groceries at about 3 p.m. He then went to see his mother around 4 p.m. in Swampscott, about an hour's drive from Cohasset, but did not have his cell phone and got lost, making the trip longer than usual. He said he left his mother's home within about 15 minutes of arriving to run errands for her at Whole Foods and CVS. He eventually returned home to Cohasset at about 8 p.m. That's Brian's story. But prosecutors say that the evidence from January 1st tells a far different story than what Walshe claims. Brian Walshe told the babysitter and a family friend that he had lost his phone, but subsequent analysis of his phone determined that it was actually plugged in on the morning of January 1st. However, while his phone stayed at the house, the oldest Walshe child's cell phone did not. Cell phone data from January 1st showed the oldest child's device had traveled to 2 stores. Surveillance video showed Brian Walshe walking into those same stores by himself. Around 5:30 p.m., surveillance video showed Walshe and his vehicle going to a dumpster in the parking lot of a liquor store and disposing of items before returning to his car. Afterwards, the device traveled to the dumpster at an apartment complex where Brian Walshe's mother lived. The phone then traveled to a Lowe's store, where Walshe is also seen on surveillance footage. He purchased 5 5-gallon buckets, a hacksaw, 48 terry cloth towels, a full coverage suit, 200 disposable rags, trash bags, and cleaning products. The phone then traveled to a CVS store where Walshe was seen on surveillance purchasing 13 different types of hydrogen peroxide. Anna's cell phone pinged in the area of their Cohasset home on January 1st and 2nd. Brian told investigators that he took one of his children for ice cream at a juice bar in Norwell on January 2nd while the babysitter watched his 2 other kids. Investigators have confirmed that this trip occurred. He then went to Home Goods and purchased 3 rugs. Just after noon on January 2nd, Brian Walshe made several more Google searches, including, quote, "Hacksaw best tool to dismember," unquote, "Can you be charged with murder without a body?" and "Can you identify a body with broken teeth?" According to surveillance video, Brian Walshe traveled to a Home Depot in Rockland wearing a surgical mask and gloves and made a cash purchase. There, Walshe bought $450 of cleaning supplies, including mops, a bucket, tarps, goggles, a hatchet, and baking soda. The next day, on January 3rd, he allegedly made more Google searches, including, quote, "What happens to hair on a body? What is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on the surface in the woods?" And "Can baking soda mask or make a body smell good?" unquote. Cell phone data tracked Brian Walshe's whereabouts to an apartment complex in Abington, Massachusetts at 4:27 p.m. on January 3rd. Surveillance video shows he exited his car with a heavy garbage bag and put it into a dumpster. At 4:48, he traveled to another apartment complex in the same town, and at 5:10, he went to an apartment complex in a different town, where he again discarded items in a dumpster. These garbage bags were taken away and incinerated by the time police tracked them down. On January 4th, Brian visited Home Goods and TJ Maxx to buy towels and bath mats, and visited Lowe's to buy squeegees and a trash can. Anna Walshe had been expected back in D.C. at work on January 3rd, and on January 4th, her employer, the real estate company Tishman Speyer, called police to report that she did not show up for her job. According to Brian Walsh's defense attorney, he called her workplace to ask whether they knew of Anna's whereabouts before the employer called police. Cohasset police went to Anna Walsh's home for a well-being check, and Brian spoke with investigators multiple times and provided a timeline for his actions and whereabouts on January 1st and 2nd. During the well-being check, police noticed that Brian Walsh's vehicle had the back seats down and a plastic liner in the back of the car. Law enforcement returned to the Walshe home on January 5th, the next day, and noticed that the plastic liner was gone from Brian Walsh's vehicle and the carpet of the car showed fresh vacuum streaks. Brian told police that he threw the liner in the trash. Cell phone data showed that Brian Walshe went to Swampscott on the 5th and traveled to the corner of an apartment complex where there was a dumpster. 10 trash bags that originated from this dumpster contained bloodstains, cleaning materials, a hacksaw, a hatchet, as well as a purse and boots worn by Anna Walshe, and her COVID-19 vaccination card. Following this dumpster find of Anna's personal items, Cohasset police announced that she was missing and asked the public to come forward with any information. Police announced that Anna had been last seen shortly after midnight on New Year's Day. In the following days, they launched a massive search for her that included K-9 officers and search and rescue teams in the wooded areas near her home. At least 6 investigators were tasked with driving to the North Shore of Massachusetts and watching surveillance video in an attempt to verify Brian Walsh's timeline of events. Investigators did not observe Brian Walshe on video at the Whole Foods or the CVS in Swampscott on January 1st, even though he stated that he had visited both places on behalf of his mother. On January 7th, Cohasset Police and Massachusetts State Police announced that the search for Anna Walshe had ended. Investigators then obtained a search warrant for the Walshes' Cohasset home and found blood and a bloody knife in the basement. Brian Walshe was arrested and charged with misleading the police in an investigation. On January 9th, Brian was arraigned in court and pleaded not guilty to the charge of misleading the police. The prosecutor said that investigators had found no evidence of Anna Walshe taking a rideshare from the couple's home on January 1st, and that Brian's statements that she did so caused a delay in the investigation. The judge set bail at $500,000 cash, and the next hearing was scheduled for February 9th. The police released an affidavit in support of the criminal complaint of misleading the investigation that laid out the authorities' timeline of the prior week. It describes Brian Walsh's statements to authorities as a clear attempt to mislead and delay investigators, and outlines several trips Brian made that were not requested and approved beforehand that may represent violation of the terms of his fraud probation. Investigators conducted searches north of Boston and collected a number of items that were processed and tested, and the DA publicly called Anna Walsh's disappearance suspicious. According to a source with direct knowledge of the investigation, investigators put crime scene tape around dumpsters near the home of Brian Walsh's mother in Swampscott and dug through the trash at a transfer station in Peabody, both locations north of Boston. Law enforcement officers found a hacksaw, torn up material, and what appears to be bloodstains at the Peabody site, and that evidence was sent for testing. On January 17th, an arrest warrant charging Brian Walshe with murder was issued for the death of his wife Anna. This, according to Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey. And the next day, on January 18th, Brian Walshe was arraigned in Quincy District Court on charges of murder and disinterring of a body without authority. The prosecutor has accused Brian of dismembering his wife and disposing of her remains in dumpsters. She also laid out some of the evidence that led to the charges, including the discovery of Anna Walsh's belongings and blood in the garbage and Brian Walsh's Google searches. A not guilty plea was entered on Brian Walsh's behalf. His attorney issued a statement suggesting that the evidence against him was not strong. Said Brian's attorney, quote, "In my experience, where, as here, the prosecution leaks so-called evidence to the press before they provide it to me, their case isn't that strong. When they have a strong case, they give me everything as soon as possible. We shall see what they have, and what evidence is admissible in court, where this case will ultimately be decided." On March 30th of this year, 2023, a grand jury indicted Brian Walshe on charges of murder, misleading investigators, and improperly conveying a human body. The indictment moved the case from Quincy District Court to Norfolk County Superior Court. And on April 27th, Brian Walshe was arraigned in court and pleaded not guilty to the charges. The prosecutor offered new details from the investigation. Among them, Anna Walshe had taken out approximately $2.7 million in life insurance on herself, where Brian Walshe was the sole beneficiary. She also had a life insurance policy through her employer. The defense countered the prosecution's notion that Walshe was trying to cash in on his wife's life insurance policies by saying there is no evidence Mr. Walshe was in the least bit needing of money, noting that his mother is wealthy. The judge ordered Brian Walshe to be held without bail and set his next pretrial conference for August 23rd, and the next hearing for November 2nd. So maybe we'll have an update pretty soon. Hey, before I let you go, I'd like to remind you, as I often do, of the free 3-digit Lifeline number 988 that you can call anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to receive free professional counseling for mental health, substance use, or suicidal thoughts. So if you find yourself in a dark place and you need to connect with someone, please do remember 988. Program it into your phone now. And please always remember that you are loved and the world is a better place with you in it. Now, I'm not qualified to help you if you're really in dire straits. But if you'd just like to connect with someone, share what you're going through, share a story of overcoming a disability, or share your own Kinda Murdery story that could inspire an episode of the show, then please do feel free to reach out to me, kindamurdery@gmail.com, @kindamurdery on all social media, or you can call the Kinda Murdery hotline toll-free 888-MURDERY. That's 888-687-3379, and you can leave me a message. I surely do appreciate you listening, and if you like the show, consider taking a moment to leave a 5-star review wherever you happen to listen. Until next time, I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.